Hello and welcome to our webinar, US T+1 Ready to Hit a Home Run. In our previous webinar in October, we covered the impact that T+1 will have on custody operations. In today's webinar, we will look at the final push towards T+1 in North America. This will include an update on the testing in the US and the latest news from both Canada and Mexico. We have a panel of experts here who will share with you how BNP Paribas is positioned to support your operations in the new reality that will exist from May. I should say this webinar is tailored for the sell side. There's another one scheduled for the buy side. So without further ado, let me introduce the panel to you. We have Yann, who is Head of Change and Transformation. He's our T+1 program lead, so he's one of the busiest guys in the world. We have Emmanuelle, who is a custody expert focused on T+1, and with Silvia, who is a solutions manager responsible for our settlement capabilities. We're also joined by Ed, who is responsible for our execution to custody business, and Mirko, who is from our MFS, that's our market and financing services technical sales group. So it's a great group of experts we have here. We're going to have begin with me asking them some questions, going through some things that we think will be helpful to you about T+1, but there's going to be plenty of time for questions at the end. So please feel encouraged and very welcome to send in and submit questions. We will certainly try and answer all the ones that we get. So let's begin with Yann. Yann, let's talk about testing. Could you tell us how we've utilized the testing period? Where do we stand today? Are there any lessons learned from the testing that you could share with us?
Hi, Alan. It's good to be with you all today. We're now closing in on the end of DTC testing cycle 16 out of 21 biweekly cycles. DTC will keep the environment open to direct market participants until after conversion date on May 31st. BNP has completed 2 out of our 3-phase testing approach, and we're well into our final phase. In August 2023, we started with our local end-to-end US functional testing, with an emphasis on operational efficiencies as a way to eliminate lifecycle frictions. We later expanded to global and external parties with non-US regions testing, including non-standard events, bank holidays, outages, new solutions implementations, and partnerships. In Q4 of 2023, we've opened up our test environment to clients. Here, we have seen limited interest outside of ad hoc scenario for clients who've made specific functional or operational changes. Our teams remain available to help clients today with last-minute challenges and further increase their readiness. For the last stretch, we've shifted our focus to the migration weekend. With the very recent publication of the DTC Transition Weekend Runbook, we are finalizing details of the conversion rollout plan and well engaged into the migration rehearsal execution. At the market level, BNP Paribas continues its engagement with industry peers and is an active member of the T1 Transition Weekend Working Group. In terms of lessons learned, one significant takeaway is that the work does not stop with T1 going live. Whether it is deploying additional information models, counterbalancing the increase in fails, and continue our clients' education on the significance of trade date affirmation, BNP Paribas keeps a heightened focus on this industry evolution and stands ready to accompany clients well beyond May 2024.
Thank you. So, Emmanuelle, can I turn to you? When we did our last webinar back in October, we got plenty of questions about affirmations. I know we've published quite a lot of material since then, but could you tell us just once more about how BNP Paribas manages the affirmation process?
Sure. Thank you very much, Alan, for this question. Indeed, the affirmation concept triggers a lot of questions as it is a unique US concept that is comparable to the matching in other markets, but with a new mandatory requirement that was introduced by our regulator, the Securities and Exchange Commission, in February 2023, and that will come into effect in May 2024. So affirmation is not a new concept, and BNP Paribas was already processing the affirmation on behalf of our clients. What is new, in fact, is it's become mandatory, and the process will have to take place earlier in the lifetime cycle of the transaction due to the move to T+1. Consequently, DTCC, the central depository, moved the affirmation cutoff on trade date at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And recently, DTCC announced a target of having 90% of the trades affirmed by 9 p.m. Hence, from day one, BNP Paribas will support all the affirmation models that exist in the market, which are either affirmation by the custodian or self-affirmation. In the case of affirmation by the sub-custodian, we also propose the affirmation using our own institutional trade suite ID, or if the client prefer or have the need, we can affirm the transaction on behalf of the client using its own trade suite ID, so the client trade suite ID. In case the client prefer to self-affirm their transactions, BNP Paribas as settlement agent will settle the transaction as soon as we receive the notification from DTCC that the client has affirmed the transaction. The default model we are going to apply in case we don't get any other ask from the clients will be the affirmation via the usage of our own institutional trade suite ID. Having said that, it is worth highlighting that if our client or its investment manager is recognized as a registered investment advisor, there is a record-keeping requirement to be taken into consideration. For this specific case, using the registered investment advisor own trade suite ID is highly recommended because it will facilitate their new obligation to keep track of their allocation, confirmation, and affirmation with a date and a timestamp.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Could I ask you, is there anything that needs to be set up for the affirmation process to take place? Is there any particular action required of our clients or of ourselves?
Yes, that's a good question. Whatever is the client choice in terms of affirmation model, either to self-affirm or to have BNP affirming using their trade suite ID, it is very important for the new settlement standing instruction to be updated into DTCC alert platform. Like that, the broker can enter into alert and download the client settlement standing instruction. The appropriate setup in alert is key for the affirmation process, as it is the tool where the SSI are stored, but also the tool where the affirmation party is set up. Consequently, appropriate settlement instruction in alert reduce mismatching and late affirmation. On our side, the service level description will reflect the affirmation model chosen and all the related relevant information about the client and the setup he wants to have in terms of affirmation.
Thank you. Silvia, could I ask you something? Given the importance of affirming instructions by the DTCC cutoff, I guess we need our clients to send us their instructions as soon as possible. But what happens if they do not get them to us in time?
Yes, Alan, thank you. You are right, 100%. Timeliness in sending us the settlement instructions will be key. We announced back in December via client update our own cutoff for receiving client instruction and affirmed them by the US market cutoff. And, you know, we confirmed that it is 8 p.m. New York Eastern Time. So basically, we need to get your instruction by 8 p.m. New York Eastern Time to make sure that this instruction will be sent and affirmed by the 9 p.m. cutoff market. Allow me, Alan, to say that in the screen that who's listening to this WebEx has in front of them, there is a box which is including a lot of T1 material that we published recently. So you can see the documentation, you can download it for, further usage, and the client update that I just mentioned is there. The affirmation articles that you, Alan, mentioned before with Emmanuelle are also there. So please feel free to check in this box and download any documentation that might be helping in the transition process. So going back to your question, the importance of timeliness is a very important subject. And back in our WebEx that we hosted in October, we mentioned the importance for everybody in the chain to review their end-to-end processes, giving up manual actions as much as possible and pushing therefore on automation to cope with the new requirements. So we really hope that this message was well received and you're now ready to go. To answer the second part of your question, so what happens in case the affirmation is not happening, by the market cutoff? Well, there is no penalty concept for late affirmation, but we need to consider the additional costs that DTCC will apply. I'm sure you've seen in the different communication, this was also part of a package that we released some months ago. There are costs info that DTCC provided to the market participants for affirmation happening in the night at T, so what is called the NDO, so night delivery order, and the costs that are associated to what happens at the DDO, so during the day as a day delivery order. So as you can imagine, in case of high volumes, these additional costs could make quite a big difference in terms of CSD fees. So we don't want to scare anyone. This is not a threat, of course, but we want to be transparent with you on this matter. So to share knowledge about the additional costs, which we might, which might bring additional charges in the custody chain.
Thank you. Are we already monitoring our clients' activity today? And if so, is there anything coming out of that that's worth sharing with our audience?
Yes, indeed. So as my clients already, said previously, our priority is to help our clients transition to T1. And with this aim, we started months ago reaching out to clients sharing data extracted from our settlement system to show their current timing for sending settlement instruction and how this could affect their affirmation rate when we switch to the new model from May 28 onwards. We call these affirmation boosting exercise, which is ongoing as we speak. And you can remain assured that this is not, happening before the transition and then we stop, but we will continue after the T1 go live, because this is a very important exercise for everybody to be knowledgeable about the way the instructions are sent, the time the instructions are sent, what are the consequences in terms of affirmation, always having in mind the additional costs that affirmation during the 2 windows that are previously managing could be bringing, and that we could be deciding in the future to pass on to our clients.
Thank you. Now we're going to focus on some product solutions that are particularly relevant to clients transacting with a shortened settlement cycle. We've developed services to improve the straight-through processing of transactions from order to settlement. These reduce the potential of settlement failure and additional funding costs. One of these is called dealing services, but it's of most interest really to our asset owner and asset manager client base. So we're not going to go through it today, but we'll go through it in our buy-side webinar. But do reach out to us if you would like to know more about it. In today's session, we're going to focus on the solution for sell-side and wealth management clients. And this is called execution to custody. So Ed, can you help us understand the value of this offer?
Good morning and thank you, Alan. We're seeing a constant pressure on our customers in terms of market evolution. I think certainly it's highlighted with the shortening of settlement cycles, coupled with increased CSDR fines, and they're causing significant challenges for our customers. As a result of that, they're looking for solutions that's how we can look to help support them and ease that workflow and allow them to focus on their clients' needs. Execution to custody is an exception-based model that allows customers to access global markets at one point of connection, whilst reducing their cost and simplifying the trade lifecycle.
Okay, but could you explain how the process works?
Absolutely. So whilst complying with execution and insulating our clients against T+1 and CSDR risk, this model allows you to build scale with global access whilst leaving us as your service provider to take the back and middle office heavy lifting as a result. This is undertaken by our settlement algorithms that are working instantaneously to pre-match as many trades as possible. And then we only look at any exceptions that don't pre-match. So between us and our collective middle office teams that sit between our broker counterparts and us from a security services perspective, we only review those exceptions and we look to rectify them and to ensure a timely settlement as we see both sides of the trade. In a specific example of T+1 in the US, this solution elevates and alleviates the pressure on the settlement process even further. So if you trade at the end of the day in the US time, our operations platform for the US business is also the same as our Lisbon platform. So this allows us a 15-hour day to process settlements or resolve any discrepancies. And this auto affirmation makes this a highly efficient, low-risk global model, which is supported by full custody services.
Thanks, Ed. Let's move on to the FX implications of T+1. So Mirko, can I turn to you? And can you please quickly recap its impact for our clients?
Sure. First of all, hello, Alan. Hello, everyone. Yes, maybe some of this message may not be new for some of you attending today, but we have recently seen a big interest in the FX T+1 implication. That's also why we sent out the client market update and the Q&A on this topic. Let's say that the shift to T+1 is putting pressure on all the FX players. Let me give you a concrete example, Alan. Previously, our clients, they had 2 full days to run their processes, from the underlying asset execution to post-trading processes. Then they had also time to generate, execute, and settle their FX transaction. Today, with this new timeline, is clearly shorter. And for some, especially the APAC ones, the window to execute the mentioned tasks can be only a few hours.
Okay, but what can clients do to make sure the FX will settle on time?
Sure. First, the clients must review their FX operating model and assess risks. Processes can still be managed internally, but a global and efficient structure or extending working hours may be needed. This can be easy to achieve for global organizations or costly for the ones that are not there yet. Alternatively, as also encouraged by DTCC, clients may ask for help from their custodian. And of course, we, as your custodian, are here to help you to achieve a smooth transition to T+1.
Thank you, Mirko. Could you give us a quick overview on how we can support our sell-side clients?
Sure. Let's say that there are several benefits when security services is both the custodian and the FX counterparty. As a client, you can reduce your risks by having a universal bank like BNP Paribas managing entirely your FX trade life cycle, from instruction creation to execution and settlement. As an example, let's imagine one of our clients buying a US assets. With our automated FX solution, we will be immediately able to know how much USD is needed to fund their trades. We will then execute it based on clients' preferences and parameters at a transparent and pre-agreed reference rate and spreads. We can offer market fixing and algos for that. Also, thanks to our global presence, we can execute it 24 hours on 5 days. and settle it by passing cutoff or even bank holidays. Yes, we can settle your USD FX even if it's bank holiday for the non-USD currency. The cherry on the cake is that the clients do not even have to instruct payments. We take care of that too. And our clients can monitor or even control all these steps that I just mentioned in our state-of-the-art FX portal. As you can see, why should the sell-side clients bear all the FX risks when they can be passed to a universal and solid partner like BNP Paribas? We can handle your cash management efficiently and are on the clock with an attractive, transparent, and competitive FX solution. I would be happy to answer additional questions during the Q&A if needed. Thank you all.
Thanks, Mirko. Can we go back to Yann then? And Yann, we've now talked fairly extensively about T+1 in the US. Could you tell us a bit more about what is happening in Canada?
Absolutely. In Canada, the Canadian Central Depository Industry Testing started in January 2024. Similar to the US, the market testing is following a 2-week cycle structure. It will be conducted through April and focuses on direct market participants rather than clients. Throughout the summer of 2023, the T1 regulatory framework in Canada has evolved and culminated in the publication of the amendments to National Instrument 24-101 in last December. One question we frequently receive from clients: is there an affirmation process in Canada? You've heard it before from our panelists. The affirmation process is unique to the US. Instead, Canada has a matching cutoff. With NI 24-101, the new trade matching deadline will be 3:59 a.m. Eastern Time on the day after trade, T+1. The rule is a recommendation by the regulator, not a mandatory measure. Trade instructed after its defined timeline will still settle, but the executing broker will be questioned by the regulator and will need to provide a reason for delay. In order to maximize matching, regulators also highlight the increased likelihood of fail for each instruction received past that cutoff on T1. Additionally, and again echoing the US market, a broker-dealer's reputation would likely suffer from consistently matching late. Finally, all investors are expected to follow the NI 24-101 trade matching requirements, no matter where they reside. With 1 day less, trade exceptions must be resolved prior to the CDS market cutoff at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to avoid settlement fails. Although there are no penalties introduced by the ruling, regulators expect further settlement efficiency gains as a result of the shortened life cycle, and reserve the right to introduce penalties at a later stage should a significant increase in fails be observed after go live. The move to T1 in Canada is scheduled 1 day earlier than the US on May 27, 2024.
Thank you. But what about Mexico? What is the latest we're hearing from Mexico?
In July last year, the Mexican capital markets announced their intention to initiate the formal request for T1 for the May 27, 2024 date. Indeval, the local CSD, has since hosted roundtables with direct market participants to assess the impacts of T1 locally. These consultations are concluding soon. No major impacts or cutoff changes, including no announcement regarding any buy-in regime change, are expected. From an asset servicing perspective, Mexico is an omnibus market and has confirmed that pay date and record date would go back 1 day, with record date aligning to the ex-date. While the update to existing technology constitute a challenge for local market participants, the speed and automation of the matching process stand out as an area for possible improvement. Of note, unlike the US, there is also no affirmation requirements for the trade settlement in Mexico. At the time of the webinar, and I should say this is seen as a formality, but the Mexican authorities has yet to approve the settlement cycle change from T2 to T1.
Thank you. So I hope that what we've presented to you all today has been helpful. We're now going to move on and respond to the questions that have been submitted. We've got quite a few, but please feel very welcome to submit some more. Just before we do so, can I just say that as we move closer to the transition, we want to underline our enthusiasm to support you throughout this change. You are not alone. Our client servicing teams and product experts are at your disposal. They would be more than happy to go through any aspect of T+1 settlement with you. So do not hesitate to reach out to us. We'll keep you up to date with any further developments as we get closer to the change, and indeed once it becomes business as usual. So let me move on to some of the questions. Now, here's one. I think this is really for Silvia. Silvia, we hear a lot about T+1 discussions in the UK and in the EU. Could you tell us more about it?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Indeed, I must admit that in Europe and in UK we are having lots of discussions around T1. In January, for instance, we heard a message from the European Commission stating that the question is not whether there should be a move to T1 in Europe, but when and how. So the statement has brought, as you can imagine, different reactions. The majority of international players stressed the importance of coordination between Europe, Switzerland, and UK in considering T1 settlement in Europe. Additionally, European public authorities asked industry representatives to start working on a possible plan and to consider an adequate time frame for the move. On our side, we believe that there is a strong rationale for alignment between Europe, Switzerland, and the UK move. But however, there are also serious challenges to be considered, all linked to the fact that Europe is has a very fragmented structure in terms of number of CSDs, CCPs, exchanges, as well as stakeholders. I mean, we can mention the national securities regulators and many others. So the alignment between all these actors in the chain is indeed not an overnight process. So ahead of any decision by the European public authorities, we believe that there would be benefits to try to first list and spot all these challenges and then try to solve them, contributing to any required technical discussion for a potential move to T+1. And is worth concluding saying that ESMA has been tasked by the European co-legislator to produce a report on T+1, covering the T1 impact, the costs, the benefits, and the possible outline of how to move to T+1, and to provide an overview of the international developments that would be requested. So this report should come out after the US move to consider also any potential lesson learned after the US move. And my really last word with this regard is that the proposal that we support is to start with the preparation phase, having the objective to list and identify the preconditions, the changes for the market infrastructures, changes to market standard and regulation, any testing requirements. And after this phase, there should be an adaptation and an implementation phase, agreeing on a potential timetable, delivering the necessary changes to those, market practice and infrastructure that I mentioned before. So this is where we stand with regards to discussions in Europe and UK more widely.
Thanks a lot, Silvia. That's very helpful. There's a question here for Yann, I think. Yann, the United States, Canada, and Mexico are all moving, but what about the other countries in North America? Any news from them?
Thanks, Alan. You're allowing everyone to travel quite a bit this morning, so thank you for the question. On March 6, 2024, next stop here is Argentina. The Argentina stock market announced that the implementation date for the reduction of the settlement cycle from T2 to T1 for the equities and bond market will also be May 27, 2024. This change will aim to align Argentina with the US, Canada, and Mexican markets, as you've heard, which will also migrate in May 2024. The BYMA has also announced that settlement on a T0 basis will remain available to participants without any change to the current process. We're staying appraised at the market evolutions, and we'll keep our clients updated when further updates are coming in.
Thanks. And there's a question here taking us back to North America. Mirko, it's for you. Would you expect any consequences within the FX settlement within CLS? That's continuous linked settlement, I believe.
Yes. Let's say the industry has anticipated that at least 20% of the current activity will be executed outside the CLS platform. So even if CLS studies the possibility of extending its submission cutoff of 1 hour or so, the associated complexity and the time difference with the EMEA and APAC would not match the T+1 May 2024 period. The industry is anticipating an increase of the FX gross settlement, mostly with the associated custodian. As I was mentioned before, when security services is both custodian and the FX counterparty, CLS is not needed at all, as the payments are managed internally in our books and without cutoff constraints. Therefore, we will be able to accommodate all the T0 transactions from our clients if needed.
Okay, but what if somebody manages the FX themselves? Would they still get the upside benefit you're describing?
Yes. The upside will stay the same. Our client can choose from the, let's say, automated solution I was explaining before, or they can continue handling their process. They just need to contact one of our 6 local desks to manage their effects, continue to benefit from the non-cutoff and the non-settlement risks.
Super. Now, there's a question coming in here. I think this is probably for Emmanuelle. We will self-affirm using our own Trade Suite ID, but we'll still be uploading settlement instructions via Neolink using Model C. Will this create duplicate settlement instructions?
That's a very good question that we frequently had from our client during the past months and the discussion we had with clients. So we need to clarify the fact that even though the client will choose to self-affirm, we still expect to receive the instruction either via Swift or via Neolink at this stage. And this applies for all the model A, B, C. At this stage, we still want to receive the instruction from the client, and this will not create any duplicate in our settlement platform.
So no duplicates. And then there's another question, I think, for you, Emmanuelle. How many clients do you have using the standard model? And do you expect many to move on to model B or C before go live? And do you have many clients that don't affirm at all today? What is your plan with them?
It's a lot of questions. So I don't have a specific number of clients using the standard model versus the self-affirmation model. What can I say is that, for example, a year ago, 90% of our transactions were affirmed using the standard model, meaning we were affirming the transaction on behalf of the client using our own BNP Paribas institutional ID. With the new regulation, and especially Regulation 204.6, which implement a record keeping obligation for registered investment advisor, we saw a lot of interest for the Trade Suite ID, for owning the Trade Suite ID for the client, because this facilitates the new requirement of keeping a record of allocation, confirmation, and affirmation with a date and a timestamp. So we saw a lot of requests for the client to obtain their own institutional ID. So a switch from affirmation by the custodian using our own TSID to affirmation by the custodian either using the client TSID or self-affirmation. And we had a discussion yesterday with DTCC it was a regular meeting, but they did confirm the same thing, that they are receiving a lot of application from entity that want to have their own trade suite ID because they want to self-affirm their transaction, but more importantly, they want to have the possibility to retrieve the data from DTCC Trade Archive in order to answer to the Securities and Exchange Commission new requirement in terms of record keeping. To answer the question about do we have clients that do not affirm at all today? Yes, it is true that we have clients that if we put our shoes in the context of T+1, either do not affirm or affirm late. So what the action we have taken for the past months at BNP Paribas is to contact those clients to understand why they don't affirm or why they do affirm late compared to the affirmation cutoff that already exists. And to work with them in order to make sure that in the context of T+1 and in view of May 2024, they will increase their rate of affirmation, and that we will manage to reach the target of DTCC, that is 90% of affirmation on trade date by 9 p.m.
Thank you. Silvia, question here, I think really for you. Will there be a delay to let clients adapt before passing on fees and costs for late affirmation?
Yes, indeed. We won't be passing the costs as soon as the move to T+1 is live. So as I was saying before, there will be an adaptation period. We are checking, and we will continue to check the behavior of our clients. We are already in contact with quite a few number of them to review the processes, so to understand what is the hurdle behind sending the instruction in a timely manner, for us to try to help as much as we can with all the set of services that the panelists were mentioned before, if this can be a booster to their affirmation rate. And as such, the answer is yes, definitely. This is like an ongoing process that won't be ending on May 28th, but will continue. And so you can remain assured that bilateral discussions will be happening to review the process, and I said, and to see how any situation can be further improved to reach the benchmark that Emmanuelle was just mentioning before.
Okay, and then there's a question here really for Emmanuelle. Emmanuelle, we currently have an instruction cutoff at settlement date 5 p.m. European time with BNP Paribas. Would this cutoff change considering that the affirmation cutoff, which is now settlement date -1, 9 p.m. US time? So what's happening with cutoffs?
So that's a good point to clarify. So there is two things. There is the affirmation cutoff and the settlement cutoff. Both of them already exist. What is going to change is that it will happen 1 day earlier. So the settlement cutoff will not change. The settlement cutoff that you have with BNP Paribas today on settlement date at 5 p.m. CET will not change. What is changing is the affirmation cutoff. Today, the affirmation cutoff is on settlement date -1 at 11:30 Eastern Time. That cutoff will be moved by DTCC on trade date at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So it means that from a BNP Paribas perspective, your affirmation cutoff will be at 8 p.m. on trade date Eastern Time. So no change on your settlement cutoff. It will remain 5 p.m. CET. But what is going to change is the affirmation cutoff that will move at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on trade date. For the DTCC cutoff, and for the BNP Paribas cutoff, it's 8 p.m. Eastern Time on trade date.
Okay, thank you. Mirko, a question here. For Auto FX, if we are buying a US name on a Tuesday and this gets sent to BNP at 8 p.m. EST, would there still be time for the FX to be traded on the same day for T+1 settlement also?
Okay, sure. Thanks for the question. Let me start assuring all our AutoFX clients that we are already handling T+1 and T0, T1 and T0 FX. So for us, from an FX perspective, AutoFX perspective, this T+1 is not going to have any impact on the activity. When needed, the platform has been enhanced, like the bank holiday I was mentioning before. So the clients will not even notice from an FX perspective the change when done with us. Coming back to the question, the answer is yes, because with our 24 hours coverage, as soon as we receive the FX, the information, it will be transformed into an FX and executed. So the price, it will be the market price at the time. The only slight change is that being 8 p.m. EST already tomorrow, from an FX perspective, because the FX is executed from a pack desk, the only slight difference that the FX will be booked with the trade date equal to the value date in this case. That is also the value date of the underlying assets. So again, no difference in pricing, no difference in value date, just a slightly difference in the trade date that is tomorrow, because this is how the FX market works. After 5 p.m. New York is tomorrow for FX, but again, there is no impact on pricing and value date.
Thank you. And Ed, there's a question just come in here for you, I think. It says execution to custody. Is this, well, I guess it's asking about where is this available? What markets is this available for?
Thanks, Alan. So this is a global solution. We have presence in each of the main regions across the world, but obviously this gives you global access from an execution and a post-trade custody perspective. I think, you know, we're also seeing a lot of clients come through with questions at the moment, because obviously T+1 isn't just being discussed as we are covering this topic in this call today. You know, this is very much a topic for Australia, the UK and pan-European markets as well, for coming in the sort of next 3 to 5 years. So this is a very, you know, prompt and efficient solution for our client.
Okay, that brings us really to the end of the webinar. We will send out the slide deck to everybody who has attended. And I should point out there's a lot of information about this subject and other post-trade topics on our website, so do visit it. Thanks to all our panelists for sharing their knowledge with us. I found this very helpful and very educational. I'm even beginning to understand the affirmation process. And thanks to our marketing team. Thanks for putting this together. It's really worked very well. But most of all, I'd like to thank the audience for joining us. Do get in touch with us through your client service officer if you have further questions or if you want to talk to us more about T+1. But thank you so much for joining us today. Goodbye.